Yeah, welcome. So welcome everybody to the today's session of the SCAR Connect online training series that we're gonna start today. I'm Inga Beck, and I'm working for SCAR, especially for the SCAR Action Group on Equality, Diversity, Inclusion, but also for the SCAR CBET committee. And yeah, as a outcome of the meeting in April, where there was this wish to have this training session for the SCAR community. But if we, gonna dive or start with the webinar today, just a quick housekeeping note before. So this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be made available online afterwards. So please feel free to join us, and even if you need to step away at any point or wish to revisit parts of the discussion, you can do that. Um, then a short introduction to our three distinguished speakers that we have today with us. We're gonna start with Cassandra Brooks. She is an associate professor in environmental studies and a faculty fellow at the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research at the University of Colorado Boulder. So it's quite early for her right now. And she works at the intersection of marine science, environmental policy, and public outreach, with a strong focus on achieving conservation solutions through her research, policy work, and communications. And her work has focused on Antarctic region for the last 20 plus years, and she currently serves as chief official for SCAR's Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System, which is also the topic of our webinar today. Second, we have José Carlos Xavier. He is an associate professor and principal investigator at the University of Coimbra, but I think right now you are in the UK right now.
No, I'm in Portugal at the moment,
Oh, okay.
on the way
Okay.
down, on the way south.
Yeah, but he's often in the UK because he's also an honorary fellow of the British Antarctic Survey. And he has led multiple Antarctic research expeditions since 97 and plays a significant role in Portugal's polar science, policy, education, and outreach efforts. And I think most of you know him from his amazing outreach work. And then we have Ryan Fogt. He's a PhD and is a professor of meteorology and director of the Scalia Laboratory for Atmospheric Analysis of the Ohio University. So he's at the other end of the world, which made it quite complicated to find a good time for everybody. His expertise is in Antarctic climate change, especially the dynamics of the Amundsen-Bellinghausen seas, and he will give us some insight of his work outside science today. Um, so we'll start the webinar today and right now, and we have a Q&A live session afterwards where our experts will still be there. And so if you have any questions, just submit it in the chat. And yeah, thanks you all for joining right now. We are 26 now. And welcome, Cassandra. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Inga, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. It is 4:30 in the morning here, so if I'm a little bit rusty, I apologize. And I think this is one of the beauties of SCAR is that we get to work internationally, but it means we also have to work across all these crazy time zones. So can everyone hear me okay and see my full screen? Yeah, wonderful. Awesome. So yeah, I'm Cassandra Brooks, and really here to talk to you more about the Antarctic Treaty System, and specifically our SCAR group that works on the Antarctic Treaty System. So I always like to start by sharing that here in Antarctica, and I think you're all familiar with this beautiful continent that we're all focused on, but I want to share with you that before we discovered the continent, before we even knew that Antarctica for sure existed, The ancient Greeks actually insisted that there was this great southern land in symmetry with the north because they said without it, the earth would topple over because of all the land mass in the north. And indeed, it was this idea of a great southern land that first drove nations to seek it out to potentially exploit its riches. I don't know if any of you have seen this map from 1565, but this is what some imagined that Antarctica looked like, this great southern land, and it was believed to be more bountiful than the Americas. And so, if you could take a minute and look at Antarctica on this map, you can see there's some crazy things on here, including unicorns and rhinos. Here's a unicorn here in Antarctica. And so it was this idea, right? Like, let's go to this great southern land that's full of riches. But of course, even by 1770, this is what we knew of Antarctica, like nothing really. It was this great empty hole on global maps, this unknown land with explorers setting out to find it. And among those early explorers was Captain James Cook, who was instructed by Great Britain to find the Great Southern Land and its resource bounty. And in 1773, of course, he was the first one to cross the Antarctic Circle. But he didn't find the actual continent. And rather than finding this bountiful resource, I love this quote. He said, "The world would not be benefited by discovering the continent that future explorers seeking to discover Antarctica would have to confront the unexpressible horrid aspect of the country, a country doomed by nature never once to feel the warmth of the sun rays, to lie ever buried under everlasting snow and ice." And of course, we've grown to love this this extreme environment. José's on his way there tomorrow. But this is these first impressions of the place. But the resource bounty that Cook actually did find was bounties of seals and whales. And many of you probably know that those expeditions of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries did harvest seals and whales to the brink of extinction, which many have recovered now, thankfully. But amidst this harvest, explorers actually continued to come to Antarctica, planting their flags and staking their claims. And many of you probably know some of these amazing historic stories of these explorers. There were three global powers, though, the USSR, USA, and Great Britain, who all continued to contest that they were the first to discover the actual continent. And the point is that over the course of exploring and planting those flags, countries staked claims across Antarctica. And by 1942, we had 7 different states dividing up Antarctica like a pie. And we had, including competing claims in the Antarctic Peninsula region between Great Britain, Argentina, and Chile. Importantly, we had these 7 claimant states that you can see listed there, but we did have the USSR and the USA at the time reserving their right to claim the whole thing, as they do. And tensions over claims were really extreme at times, especially in those overlapping territories where there actually were reports in the 1940s and 1950s of military action, including there was a famous case of Argentina firing shots at Great Britain in Hope Bay. But 1946 actually saw our biggest military show in the Antarctic, and this was coming just after World War II, where the United States had a pretty overinflated military, and the Cold War was beginning, and so they executed maybe their most well-known one is this Operation High Jump, in which they sent almost 5,000 men, 13 vessels, and 33 aircraft to basically train them how to fight in the icy South. And the point was to set up bases, but also to train men to fight in Arctic-like conditions in case war was waged with Russia in the far north. So that's what it really was about. But in the midst of these tensions, so we have these like intense military tensions over Antarctica in the 40s and 50s. But in the midst of all this, and even historically, when we had all these explorations where countries are planting flags, science always provided unity in Antarctica. All of those historic expeditions that existed included science and scientists, and they were always making discoveries, helping to shape national identities. If you're all familiar with the famous case of Ernest Shackleton getting stuck in the ice in the Weddell Sea, and even after they lost their ship and were stranded, the scientists continued to do science, continued to collect samples and to make discoveries. And science has always been really core in our relationship to Antarctica. And not just science, but international science collaboration. It was actually 1882-83 that we had our first international polar year, and that was a collaborative and intensive international effort that focused on the poles. And the second came in 1932-33. And I think this is really important to know because it's been that despite geopolitical tensions in the world, no matter what's going on. In Antarctica, science provides this sense of diplomacy and unity that even if countries are fighting in other parts of the world, they'll collaborate in Antarctica and they'll support each other. So there was a third international polar year that I really want to focus on, and this came in the form of an international geophysical year, which was set in 1957-58, and it included this major Antarctic component. And so out of that, there was an international science Council Antarctic meeting, and it was decided that there should be a committee to facilitate that international organization of scientific activities in Antarctica, and specifically to prepare a plan for the scientific exploration of Antarctica. And so that's where this special committee on Antarctic research was born, which is now, of course, turned into the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research in SCAR. But this was where it really came out of this International Geophysical Year. And at that time, a delegate from all the 12 countries that were going to be working in Antarctica was selected to be part of this new committee. And I really want to emphasize that this special year in 1957-58, this special year of research focused on Antarctica, was in the midst of the Cold War. And what was set up was this amazing framework for scientific collaboration that included freedom of science. And this meant that scientists could operate across Antarctica. So despite all of those claims, that map I showed you of Antarctica cut up as a pie, despite all those different claims, science could happen across Antarctica. New bases were built, science and personnel were shared and exchanged, infrastructure was shared, and that included administration like communications, forecasting, rescue. And so effectively, claims were suspended for the sake of science during this International Geophysical Year, which is really remarkable. And based on that unprecedented unifying scientific collaboration that happened in the International Geophysical Year, and this was also, again, in the midst of this like crisis of the Cold War, instead of waging war in Antarctica or fighting over those claims, right after that International Geophysical Year, we actually moved to a peace treaty between the 12 countries who were involved in that science, in that International Science Year. And so President Eisenhower, who's the US president at the time, convened this conference in Washington. And on December 1st, 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed. And it was immediately hailed as an international breakthrough, advancing the cause of world peace. And I love the preamble. I'm just going to read it to you. It says that recognizing that it's in the interest of all mankind that Antarctica shall continue forever to be used exclusively for peaceful purposes and shall not become the scene or object of international discord. So many of you might be familiar with the treaty, but if you're not, its provisions are absolutely amazing. It actually is the first post-World War II arms limitation agreement. So it first was this peace agreement, peace and science agreement, and it prohibits military operations, it prohibits nuclear activities, it suspends all those sovereignty claims, and importantly, it grants freedom of science. And then later, actually, through the environmental protocol, mining was banned and Antarctica was designated as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. So really first was a peace and science treaty and later became an environmental agreement as well. And the treaty is part of this larger regime of the Antarctic Treaty System, which includes the Protocol on Environmental Protection, the SEALS Convention, and the Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, or CAMLR. Collectively, this system governs the land and oceans around Antarctica. And as I've already emphasized, it really is dedicated to peace, science, and environmental protection. These agreements are in place indefinitely. Sometimes you hear on the news about the protocol that it's going to expire, the treaty's going to go away, but all these agreements are in place indefinitely unless there was consensus agreement for them to go away. Currently, there's 29 voting parties to the treaty and 29 non-voting, and 27 to CAMLR and 10 acceding states. These agreements, CAMLR and the treaty, meet annually, and all decisions must be based on science. I'll get into that more in a minute, and must be based on consensus as well. So hopefully I've made clear that science was really the basis for the agreement of the Antarctic Treaty as a whole, and this has continued to remain true, where it's really central to all the decision making across the Antarctic Treaty System. So from the CAMLR Convention, it says that the Commission shall formulate, adopt, and revise conservation measures based on the basis of the best available scientific evidence. And then under the environmental protocol, it says the Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting shall draw upon the best scientific and technical advice available. And this is where SCAR continues to play a role. So I'm not going to read you all of this, but this is under the environmental protocol under Article 10. It makes very clear that decisions should be made based on, again, science and technical advice from the Committee on Environmental Protection, but also upon the advice of the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. So we really do have this obligation to bring science into the system to help inform decision making. So I'm not going to get into too much of how it all works, but this is just a graphic showing you in general of how decisions are made of the Antarctic Treaty, where you have measures, decisions, and resolutions. Those are essentially your laws that are adopted by the Antarctic Treaty parties. And you can see where SCAR feeds in advising the Committee on Environmental Protection and also advising the treaty on those decisions in terms of science, bringing science in. And then within CAMLR, it's a little different, where CAMLR similarly adopts conservation measures, which are their legally binding measures. And CAMLR very much has their own scientific committee, which advises them on science. And then they have a variety of working groups and expert groups that feeds into that decision making. And that's all science feeding in. And then SCAR is an observer, where we also can bring science into CAMLR, but play a less central role than we do for the Antarctic Treaty. So specifically, our role in the Antarctic Treaty System, we are an official observer to the treaty. And again, really our role is to provide independent, objective scientific advice. And we provide this on a range of topics, particularly focused on environment and conservation. And so this organization, or this part of SCAR, this Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System, is our specific group that's tasked with developing SCAR's advice across the Antarctic Treaty System. And usually we go to the treaty meetings and to CAMLR. We go there annually, and it's usually members of this standing committee as well as members of the SCAR Secretariat and Executive Committee. And often we will bring in external experts as well as needed. And so we, throughout the year, we're really consulting across the different SCAR groups. We have this amazing SCAR community that has thousands of scientists that are all experts. And of course, we have all our different SCAR groups. And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of my year has already been spent coordinating with those groups and trying to work with those groups to bring forward expertise to the meetings of CAMLR and the treaty. And we do two things. We respond directly to requests for advice from the Antarctic Treaty System, and sometimes we actually bring advice forward, drawing attention to emerging issues that might be coming out. And I just want to emphasize a couple things. Like, what's really important for us when we develop our scientific advice for the treaty system is that we're apolitical, so that we're not taking a certain political or focusing on a specific country, and that all of our work that we bring forward is based on scientific findings. And so sometimes we do have recommendations or proposals, but really our role is to provide objective scientific advice, not advocacy and not even policy advice. It's really about scientific advice. And so we're really strict within ourselves of making sure that the work we bring forward is accurate and independent, that it's current, that it's actually traceable to that peer-reviewed source, that it is based on peer-reviewed and publicly available science, that it is formulated on the basis of broad, inclusive, and open consultation with groups, and that it's very relevant to the treaty or CAMLR. So that's really important too, that we're actually bringing forward science advice that's relevant to the specific agenda items that the groups are talking about, and also that it's aligned with the strategic objectives and capacity of our own standing committee, noting that every SCAR group has limited funding and limited capacity, and so we can't always take forward everything we want to based on that. And so the way we actually bring this advice forward is that we submit papers to annual meetings. We submit papers under specific agenda items to the CEP and the treaty, as well as to CAMLAR. That's a big thing that we do and spend a lot of time doing. We also give a SCAR lecture at the treaty every year. And so we get to pick a topic that is timely and relevant, and actually have an expert come in and give a lecture to the treaty. We also have, throughout the year, there's workshops and discussion forums that we contribute to as well. That's all online. And then we collaborate often with parties and other observers to develop advice. And we also provide information summaries on the Antarctic Environments Portal, which you're going to hear more about from Ryan in just a couple minutes. And so this graphic just tries to summarize what I've explained, where we have all the different SCAR groups and the SCAR delegates and the portal, and that feeds into what we do and what we end up bringing forward to the ATCM, CEP, and CAMLR. And so I have a couple slides that just kind of share the current topics and priorities, and I guess largely so that you can be thinking about them if your research covers some of these priorities, that you can be thinking about perhaps there's ways you can contribute and get involved. And so within the treaty and the CEP, there's a lot of discussion over environmental impact assessments, over protected areas and protected species, over pollution and environmental monitoring. Tourism is a really big one. We're currently, parties are working on developing a tourism framework. Over the years, there have been codes of conduct developed for activities. Non-native species is a big one, as you can imagine. Developing how we're going to report on the environment in Antarctica is also one, as well as wildlife disease, especially with HBAI. Growing impacts in Antarctica and climate change impacts are definitely a key topic and priority, and including for SCAR, that's very important for us to bring forward every year. And CAMLR has different priorities in the sense that it's very much focused on marine living resources in Antarctica, and there are active commercial fisheries in the Southern Ocean. And so their key topics and priorities are focused on stock assessments and biomass estimates, as well as they have a mandate for understanding not just the harvested species, but the predator and prey species, all the dependent species. So they have to understand that too, the role of prey and predators. And they're currently working on developing a new krill fishery management strategy. And then there's a lot of other work, as you can imagine, on monitoring and pollution and bycatch, protected areas, and understanding vulnerable marine ecosystems, as well as climate change there. So I have this there just so it's part of it, and you can see the type of work we've brought forward. Last year, or this year, earlier this year to the treaty meeting, we brought forward a lot of papers, and you can see these really span those topics that are of priority to the CEP. So we try to regularly bring forward a climate change update, which brings forward the latest peer-reviewed work for parties to consider. We've been bringing forward papers on HBAI regularly. We had some plastics papers last year because that's an emerging topic. We brought forward a paper on geoengineering last year because that's very much an emerging topic, and we wanted to get on top of it. And then we brought forward a variety of other papers that were either through our early career fellows, which I'll talk about more in a second, or other aspects. And then at CAMLR, we brought forward some of the similar topics, as well as papers on krill, fish, and the Ross Sea Research Coordination Network. Just to share with you briefly who is on the standing committee to the Antarctic Treaty System. It's a pretty small list. It's unlike other SCAR groups. It's not open to anybody joining who wants to be part of it. We have basically a mandate to have specific representatives from the SCAR group. So you can see that we have a chief officer, which is me, past chief officer, which is Susie Grant, and then we have representatives from specific SCAR groups, and that's required that we have to do that. And so we have a representative from EGBAM, and then we have a representative from all the major science groups, so life sciences, physical sciences, and geosciences, as well as our data group. And then we also have representatives from all the SRPs, and a variety of other people that represent specific groups. So that's the membership of it currently. And then I wanted to share too, have a new action group focused on climate under our standing committee. And this is a long-term action group that will really help communicate climate change to the treaty and CAMLAR and SCAR's water community partners. So finally, I want to share that we do have this amazing Anti-Icons Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System fellowship program, and that QR code will take you to the application. It's live right now. We have had 7 fellows so far, and essentially these fellows apply to join the SCAR delegation either at the treaty meeting or CAMLAR and actually work with us to develop a paper on their research that they get to bring forward and present to the meeting. So they don't just go to the meeting, they participate in the delegation and bring a paper forward. So I encourage you to scan that QR code, learn more about the fellowship. If you're early to mid-career, actually, go ahead and apply or share it with your community. It's a really amazing opportunity to learn more about that science policy interface and how it works. So I'll just close with encouraging you to get involved. I welcome your engagement with our Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System to contribute your expertise, including you could potentially help with a paper, with our intersessional work, or with the environmental portal, which you'll hear about more in a sec, and to work with your respective SCAR groups or through me. So I have my email up there. I encourage you to get in touch. I have a website that links to our group, and then again, that QR code if you want to apply for that fellowship. So I will leave it there, and I will pass it over to you, Ryan.
Awesome. Good job, Cassandra, as always. Okay. All right, so I'm going to briefly talk about the Antarctic Environments Portal here. So I'm coming to you not necessarily as a scientist, but as a editor for the Antarctic Environments Portal, which is this great interface between all the wonderful science that's done across the SCAR community to the policymakers that act on that science and make decisions on it. It's a little bit different than the advice and the papers that are brought forward by the standing committee itself. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll also talk about some ways that you can get involved. So the Antarctic Environments Portal, its main purpose is really to provide policy relevant summaries of all of the awesome Antarctic science that's written for these policymaker audiences. So this is a challenge. Most scientists don't have a lot of expertise and skills in writing for a non-scientific audience. They often write in their own disciplines and with their own language and their own very technical kind of ways of framing things and discussing things. And so part of the skill that's part of the treaty, the Environments Portal here is to take those wonderful bits of information that are coming out of the research that this community is doing and to translate it and to put it into words that are accessible for a wide audience, including policymakers. And our goal then is to have a lot of background information provided to these decision makers that they can refer to and have more information that they might then get from the papers that are submitted by the standing committee from Cassandra and that group. So a distinction between what we do in the portal and what's done by the papers that are presented each year to the treaty system. The papers that are presented in the portal are permanent. They are up there on that site for a long time. We can update them as the science evolves and new information comes up. But it's a resource that's just always there for anyone, not just the policymakers, but anyone in the world to access information about Antarctic science. So it's this not just one time we submit there and then you can go to the meetings and get the history of the different papers that are submitted, but this is a living resource for all of the information across Antarctic science research. Also, our papers have a lot more literature cited to them typically. There's not a specific length requirement. We did try to keep them short, but there are word requirements that we have to maintain for papers that are submitted to the treaty. We don't have that necessarily with the portal. There are also much more policy independent in the sense that there's not advice mentioned in these papers. They are just providing scientific information, the background, a summary of the latest research and knowledge on particular topics of Antarctic science. And so these go forward into the portal and exist there, and then we can reference them in the papers that we submit to the treaty system itself or to CAMLR. Cassandra already showed you this slide, but the portal kind of sits at the edge of what SCAR does and provides this way that SCAR groups can have a much longer lasting impact on what's being done at the treaty systems meetings and also the CAMLR, so that we have this background and repository, if you will, of latest scientific information. The papers that are presented into the portal are meant to be policy relevant. So it's not all of the great SCAR science that's being done. It's those that are being discussed in agenda items at CEP, the ATCM, or CAMLR in particular that we're looking for. And so it's just really great interface in interacting with SCAR and the wider policymaking community. Prior to the ATCM, we had 3 papers come out this year. And so we had a paper that Cassandra was part of on Southern Ocean acidification. We also had a public perceptions paper that came out from one of our other standing committees. And then an update on the rapid changes that have been going on sea ice, including the impacts that have been happening with some ecosystems in response to the sea ice losses over the recent years. So as you see here, we have 6 different areas of content that we kind of group all of the things in on the portal. I encourage you to check it out, www.environments.eq, to just go in and see what's there. It's a really great resource if you're learning something new for the first time in a different area outside your discipline. You can go in and find some of the literature and a really informative summary that can then lead you into more further research with all the citations and information that's provided in that information summary. So I encourage you to use it as a resource for your own work, but of course share it and promote it and allow other people to see it as well. And then lots of things are going on right now in response to the recent meetings that we've had this year. In human activities, one of the things that was brought to our attention at the Committee for Environmental Protection this year in June was that much of the information that we have in environmental remediation and waste management was outdated. And so we have many papers that are in works. We have authors already identified and working on different topics that were brought forward last year as agenda items in the CEP that we're now providing much more updated information. They're working on a cleanup manual revision and other aspects of ongoing intersessional work through the CEP. And so we're working to provide them with more information on the portal on these new topics that they're looking on. Cassandra mentioned that the HPAI, we have a paper that's coming up on that as well. And so that's a really important area of active research and development because we're seeing cases now start to emerge near Antarctica and within the Antarctic Treaty System itself, that area. The cryosphere, we have a paper coming up on global sea level rise contributions from Antarctic ice sheet, as well as the abrupt changes in Antarctica, including ice sheet, ocean, and sea ice. That's a summary from a recent paper that was published in Nature earlier this year. And then following on from the SCAR lecture last year, not this year, but the previous year, a paper on the tropical teleconnections and the associations of the tropics to the Antarctic climate and how those are related to ongoing rapid changes in the Antarctic environment. So all these papers are forthcoming. I hope to have them up and online on the portal before the next treaty system meetings next year. Some of them hopefully even by the end of this calendar year, depending on how quickly the authors and everything can go through. I should mention that the papers that are on the portal are held to the standards of a typical scientific paper that you'd see published in a journal. So papers are submitted by authors. I do some initial editing to make sure that they're written in an accessible way, and I work with the authors on that bit. Once they're ready for that, I send them out to 2 at least external blind reviewers that will be content experts, knowledge experts in that area of the portal paper. They will provide their own review of that paper. The authors then are tasked with responding to each of those reviews point by point, just like you would do for a journal article. And then after that, revisions are completed and all the points of the reviewers are addressed by the authors, then we have to go through another round of review for the editorial board The portal has its 15-member editorial board that are made up of policy experts, communications experts, and other scientists that will help to review it one more last time to make sure that this is indeed accessible and includes the right kind of literature, is up to date, and it's not biased, and it's not promoting any sort of agenda or advancing kind of policy action. And that will be the last round of review. The authors may have to make some revisions again at that stage, and then it goes online. So it's quite a long process. I oversee, as the editor, all of that kind of bits of communication and working with the authors, the reviewers, and the editorial board to make those processes jump through. But I wanted to make sure that you know that these papers are not just an author deciding to write on the whim and then they go online. It's not like a blog or anything. These are peer-reviewed, high rigor kind of papers that come out through the portal. So ways that you can get involved here, I'll conclude with this. If you want to write for the portal, please reach out to me. My email is at the bottom there, editor@environments.eq. If you're a science expert in certain areas that are relevant to the Antarctic Treaty System or the CEP or CAMLR, or if you find when you're perusing the portal website that there's some knowledge that you know is out of date, and there's new research developments that we haven't caught on to yet, please let me know. And so send me an email. We can have a conversation online and see if there's ways that we can get you to write for the portal, develop a team of co-authors, and take on that work, and I can lead you through that process. If you find that you would like to review articles in your area of expertise, I'm always looking for external reviewers that are happy and engaged to provide these kind of looks through of all the papers. So if you want to do a review, please reach out to me as well. Even if you just want to have your name on a list of one of those 6 areas of the portal focuses on, and you say, I'm a knowledge expert on this, I'd love to be involved. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to have you on that list. We have papers coming in almost all of those areas over the next several months, and I'm looking for external reviewers that are not involved in that writing of the work or directly involved in the research that was based on to provide some external reviews. And then also a new opportunity here. SCAR partners with Apex and the University of Colorado to provide a fellowship. This is called the ICE Narrative Fellowship. And this is for early career scientists. That's broadly defined, but we're looking for new ways to provide innovative content to the portal. So this is the URL there for the application. I'll drop it into the chat when I'm done speaking here for you, the background page for that, and then which has a link to the application itself. What we're doing here in this fellowship is looking for 3 early career researchers to provide new media, new ways of providing our information summaries besides the written summaries that we have now. These could be things like interactive websites, they could be videos, they could be different kind of visualizations of the information, ways to make it more accessible, more engaging, more exciting, maybe, to get to the policymakers in a new way. So we're looking at doing this as a trial to maybe expand in the future how the portal may operate and continue to do its written information summaries, but maybe have new ways of also presenting information and content as well. So if you're interested in that, these are paid fellowships, $750 US dollars for the stipend. We will work much through the beginning of the 2026 year with you. We'll provide you with some information and guidance, and you really can develop the project that is of your interest and your knowledge and your passion. So if you're interested in that, please do check it out. I will again drop that link into the chat. If there are other things that you'd like to learn about, please ask questions in the Q&A session later, or you're always welcome to email me at any time for further information and for further questions and discussion. Okay, I'll stop there, and thank you guys for your time and your attention.
Thanks, Ryan. Both we already have but is eager to look at your narrative.
Yes, I will. So hello, everyone. Hello, here is I have some good news. Here is midday. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This my intervention will complement what Cassandra's and Ryan mentioned, because I was trying to put myself as a scientist. If I was a SCAR scientist, what I would like to know regarding the TCMs rather than avoiding it. So, so welcome to the tour, and we'll complement very nicely what has already been said. But I think it's really nice as a scientist how relevant your science can be. So this is my perspective as the head of delegation of Portugal. Portugal joined the Antarctic Treaty in 2010 and the CEP, the Commission on Environment Protection, in 2013. And I've been the head of delegation since day one. So it's really, really a good learning phase. And coming as an Antarctic marine biologist, it was very valuable to understand the value of science, as has been mentioned, is crucial, and the role of SCAR in all of it. So having such a background was very valuable at the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings. So it was highly engaging, was very different from what we have in a SCAR conference. One thing that really comes true if I just arrived in an Antarctic Treaty Consultative meeting is that actually there's various scientists there. So the SCATS members will be there. Ryan will be there from the Environmental Portal. So there's a wide range of colleagues. Kevin Hughes, Anoop, Birgit, you name it. There's so many colleagues around the room, including scientists, that are there to help you. And it is very interesting. The first immediate reaction that I have when I was listening to all the discussions is what has been mentioned already, is how crucial science is in all the discussions regarding the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings and the role of SCAR there. So what led to it? Mostly was those tensions before after following the World War II, with the next International Geophysical Year in 57, 58, that really helped the right context to have the Antarctic Treaty. So that such a framework was excellent, that you have one region for science, for peace, for international cooperation. And it's a very simple treaty. It's in terms of guidelines, what we have is some of those levels of the international law that is good for the rest of humankind. And everything in it is simple, but be an example worldwide. And how can we have a region of the 10% of our planet, the size of Europe or United States, how can it manage in a very relevant way? And all the interesting aspects are there, including science in the middle of it, as has been mentioned. But if I wanted to learn more as a scientist, there's nothing better than use the website itself. There's numerous articles, most of the, well, all the Antarctic Treaty papers already submitted are available, but explaining what the treaty is, nothing better than just dwell on it. Actually, the website is very well structured and provide valuable information about it. And for me, was the first thing that I did as a scientist. How can my science be relevant to the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings? Just dwell what they are searching and what they actually do. But we're talking about a region that is unique, and we're talking about a treaty that is one of the most successful treaties of all times. And these concepts of peace, science in the center of it, and international cooperation are values that should never be taken for granted, especially today and the day that we're facing. So this are happening every day since the treaty in 1961, since it's been enforced. And I think that's quite spectacular. Another thing that is very important that I think is worth mentioning, yes, the treaty, we're talking about governance, but the work that all the scientists need to do in the Antarctic demands a very huge logistical support at highest level. And that needs to be recognized as well. So when we're talking about the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings, we have all the most important stakeholders that can't contribute to the science that needs to be carried out in the region and improve the governance what we need to do. So when you're searching for a collaboration, for example, it does help to know where all the stations are, which countries, and also using SCAR and the SCAR groups, research programs, then actually you could have your collaborations bottom up. Here, we're talking about providing the good science to deliver policies that will be the better to development of the treaty. But you as a scientist, there's already so many things in place, including within SCAR, to help you to do your science and evaluate how that can be transmitted into policy actions, like has been mentioned by Cassandra. So that's already there for you. And we're talking about nearly 60 parties engaged in the treaty at a higher level. So we're talking about a huge chunk of the world population interested in contributing and preserving Antarctica. The meetings themselves are very intensive. I don't know how Cassandra copes with CAMLAR and ATCMs and being wake up at 4 in the morning. I find this, we're talking about nearly 2 weeks. My daily routine is waking up around 6 in the morning, going for a run, and then work with everyone, and then trying to go to bed and see my last emails by the 11 and collapse and start everything again. It's really intensive. It's really rewarding at the end of it, but it's like a marathon and you're sprinting for 11 hours every day. And so you need to prepare yourself even physically, I find. It's crucial that when we're talking about the TCMs, I try to avoid the acronym, but the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meetings, they are dealing with decisions that are made by consensus. So all the consultative parties need to agree. So the countries that have the most developed programs, they are consultative. So they're well established, they've been there for longer. The non-consultative parties, including Portugal, we are developing our programs, and sooner or later we'll hope to become a consultative party. So this is work in progress. But what is special about the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings is that everybody's welcome in that sense, that we're non-consultative party, but the consultative parties are happy for us to contribute to the discussions. Furthermore, we have observers and experts, including, as has been mentioned, SCAR, CAMLAR from the ocean resources. We're talking the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, and the managers, the Council of Managers of the National Antarctic Programs. So we're talking about the logistics as observers, because they are nuclear, they're essential, but also numerous invited experts, including the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition, IATO from the tour operators, IUCN, WMO, numerous of them. And this is really nice because there was a vision of being inclusive and engage all the relevant organizations. And also, has been mentioned, the protocol of environmental protection was crucial to have another boost on environment protection. It's been in force since 1998, but the meetings, usually taking place at the first week of the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings, are essential on developing and addressing major issues on minimizing human impacts. And these discussions are being nuclear. Again, SCAR provides so many papers every year on addressing and providing advice on addressing issues that have been raised by the parties around the room. And it's really interesting to see the difference between the TCM, so the other group, the working groups within the Antarctic Treaty meetings, and this committee that we call the CEP, the Committee for Environmental Protection. One thing that is nuclear, you as a scientist, these meetings are, you have some colleagues, some scientists, but they're probably less than 1/3. So the other ones are diplomats from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are from the Ministries of the Environment. They could be from the Ministries of Science. They can be from other ministries. And you have to be very sensitive that you need to adapt to a certain extent to according to the wide range of colleagues that they have their own interests, but always in a very altruistic and constructive way. but don't assume they are scientists, because they're not. So, and they look at you in a way, they're like, can you explain a bit in a different way so that we can really understand? Particularly, don't forget, we want to develop policies that are relevant to minimize human impact in the Antarctic. And accelerating these links between these different stakeholders is essential, even if you come as a scientist. So when we talk to Cassandra, I'm sure most of the time she would say that your paper is really nice. What is the main point that could be relevant to minimize human impact in that region? That's what she's thinking all the time, and all her colleagues in her team. The other thing that is really important, these meetings occur every year, but between the years, there's various groups, the ICGs, we call the ICGs, the intersectional contact groups, subsidiary groups, and these are the parties, members of the parties that work between the meetings to address major issues. We're talking about, as been mentioned, on tourism frameworks, monitoring frameworks, management plans, environmental monitoring. So all these key words like monitoring, tourism, management plans. They also mention the effectiveness. So how can we improve the way these meetings actually functions with these different players? These are crucial. And you as a scientist and say, this could be a topic that I'd be interested in, and I could contribute to it, like as mentioned by Ryan with the environmental portal. So some of the hot topics include these ones, from environmental protection to pollution, and this experience on the science research programs of SCAR and the action groups, expert groups that SCAR has, they have been fundamental in addressing some of the issues that the treaty needs to address. So without realizing, probably the science that you do can be relevant. So you could contact your point of contact at your national level, your delegation, for example, or SCAR, SCATS, if you're related with it. So each delegation needs to produce papers that are presented at these meetings. And usually what we do is to base our papers based on the needs of the treaty, or what are those topics. And they have a multi-strategic plans. So they say what the hard topics that they need to be worked on. So the delegations try to adjust and say, oh, we could contribute to this. So we write a working paper. Usually they have recommendations. So they are legally binding. So they are discussed and presented, and they can be approved. Information papers is just to provide added information, and background papers, they're rarely presented. They've never been presented actually, but provide really good valuable information to the information papers or the working papers. So we need to provide, just to get an example, Portugal now is producing around 10 papers a year. So it's 8 months work that we need to prepare. So we're already preparing our papers for 2026. But you could see it's a very continuous work with numerous scientists. So providing the science that you do, how can it be relevant is their example. It's quite valuable. So this is an example working paper. You could see at the end here on the bottom right, you could see the recommendations. So it's really trying for for everyone that is reading to understand this is what we need from the recommendation. That's what we need from the paper. Usually the papers, the working papers or information papers or background papers, they are generally small. We're talking about 2 to 3 pages max. And we want to go straight to the point in how can the science, in this case, can advance policies. Here's an example of one of our papers on information papers related with climate change. So you can see it's relatively small. And as I mentioned, we spend coffee breaks, we are between meetings. If it's lunchtime, we have meetings. It's very intensive. It's very rewarding, but it's very intensive. So we're talking about nearly 2 weeks of meetings. So the CEP is agenda on the first week, and then you start having working groups at the same time on certain topics like tourism, for example, that will occur at the same time. So actually delegations need to have at least 2 members, but you can see how intensive it is. I spend most of my time running from one room to the other. These examples of science that colleagues send us to us, and then we transform them into ATCM papers. So it could be on microplastic pollution, as been mentioning. But there's another added value. For example, we work with a lot with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So they were working with the United Nations, and they were very keen to look at UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, that we will also want to contribute. And they invited us to see, so what are you doing in the Antarctic? Can we understand what is the value of these interactions? And it's something that we need to nurture. So there's also, don't forget, at national level, surely they are interested, your delegation interested in what are you doing in the Antarctic as well. And don't forget, we're talking about the SCAR, capacity building, education and training. And we've been very sensitive to bring that information through Apex and Polar Educators International on what they're doing and providing actively in contributing and in understanding what the Antarctic Treaty is to the general public and to your colleague scientists as well. And we've been doing that since 2013. And we have this intersection contact group. So they work between years, and then we present a report every year on education outreach. And it's something that provides the hard work of 6 parties, but has been overwhelming, a welcoming subject because it's a very neutral subject. And the treaty recognizes how it's valuable to explain what the treaty is and what the different parties are doing on education and outreach, to explain the younger generations and the policymakers today, the general public, on the relevance of the Antarctic Treaty. And still a lot of work, to a certain extent, that next year in Japan we'll have the second workshop on education, being the first in 2015 in Bulgaria, led by Dragomir Metiev, that is the leader on this ICG. So with Satoshi and all the Japanese delegation, we're working very closely with various parties in acknowledging much of the work that we are preparing for this workshop. And what we're actually doing for the workshop is revising the relevance on education at national level, of course, knowing what will happen in terms of organizational levels, what will happen to this ICG. So it's something more technical, but most importantly, and this is how does your science could contribute to education and outreach activities towards the next IPY. It's just around the corner, but it's in 7 years, and you could already make some major contributions. So what will come out of it, out of these Antarctic Treaty Council meetings? We're talking about measures that are legally binding. We're talking about, for example, providing legally binding measures on managed areas, so generally where the stations are, or protected areas, for example, penguin colonies and areas that heritage value, for example. Decisions that are more within the Secretariat, and resolutions that are very valuable to create more discussions within the treaty. So you could see it's a very team building with everyone and working together on these outputs. So I just provided some examples of measures, but you can look into that. I'll provide a PDF on this, on the decisions. So this becomes very technical, very law related. But it's very valuable in understanding what our discussions are taking place. But if you want to learn what are the key topics, Cassandra mentioned some of them. Kevin led this in trying to understand what are the science needs to advance governance within the treaty. And this paper was really nice in addressing some of the issues on the list that Cassandra was mentioning, and is nuclear for SCAR providing their valuable advice to the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings. We're talking about the consequences of climate change. What is the science related with non-native species, tourism, protected areas? And there's some examples, some of the hot topics that we need to address. So how does you, as a scientist, can link the science that you do to develop some of the policies into these different areas? They're a wide range, so is really to get informed. And here's the examples on also on tourism and wilderness and so on. So really, really, really impact assessment. But you just need to search for the paper and all the information is there. And finally, Cassandra mentioned this, I think is nuclear. This is called the ACE report, led by Stephen Chon. And it was really important because it provides, it reminds me of the IPCC report, that everything is there for you on your plate, for you to do the right things. And it provides really good information. And you as a scientist, also nuclear, in revising, how does the science that we do in SCAR can be relevant for a policymaker? And you as a scientist, to really think in both dimensions, you as a scientist, but also trying to understand the information that is needed for a policymaker. So we do need to act faster, quicker, and we need to collect the right information to minimize uncertainty, for example. And Ryan mentioned also the relevance of the Antarctic Environments Portal is nuclear to advance in much of these policies. And don't forget, next week is the COP in Brazil, and it reinforces what Stephen, Sean, and colleagues mentioned. We need to accelerate the speed of advancing policies to protect Antarctica and minimize our environmental impact, and make Antarctica and the Antarctic Treaty an example to the rest of the world to minimize the impact, minimize fossil fuels, zero net carbon emissions, how can we be more efficient logistically, and do the best science we can to tell the rest of the world what needs to be done. And we can contribute to these COPs as well. So in a nutshell, what I really want to understand, or what we want you to come across from this morning, is really understanding how nuclear the Antarctic Treaty is, how fundamental SCAR is to advance the Antarctic Treaty and the policies they do every year, and what kind of mechanisms can we have to make some contributions. Could be to the Antarctic Environments Portal, could be via SCAR, SCATS, could be your national delegation. It's up to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, José. And also, of course, thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Cassandra. Sure, although most of you have heard from the Antarctic Treaty System before, all of you learned quite a lot.
Is it breaking a bit, or is it is? Okay.
From Lucia in the chat. She is asking Cassandra if there is some kind of a make policy relevant suggestions, for example, to use it as a guide to apply for the Ant-Icon Fellowship. So maybe Cassandra, you can.
Yeah, and sorry, Inga, you're breaking up a little bit, so hopefully I'm not talking over you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
That's saying right. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
So yeah, actually, so thanks, Lucia, and I shared actually Kevin Hughes' article. So that's great. Yeah, great that we're super aligned there. Yeah, Kevin Hughes wrote this article that José mentioned too, that really tried to outline how science works in the Antarctic Treaty System and how folks can best work in that system. So I think that's a great primer, like it is an actual primer for that space. But I also, in the application portal for the Anti-Con Fellowship, you can see that we do have links to what the current CEP and CAMLAR priorities are, so that we've tried to help you understand. We don't expect you to know already what the science policy priorities are like that. It's actually hard to know if you're not in that space. And so we do, when you actually apply, you should find a link for both the CAMLAR and the treaty priorities. And in that fellowship, you know, if you're not sure if your work applies, like you could always reach out to me or one of the other folks involved and just get some guidance on that too. But I'd say, you know, most of there's very little Antarctic research going on that doesn't have some policy relevance, you know, and there's so many things going on right now. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Like when you actually apply, we guide you on that as well. And then Shandy, thank you so much for posting the need for volunteers. That's a huge gift to to us that folks can make as volunteers, is if you can help translate the papers into the treaty languages, and the 4 languages are English, Spanish, French, and Russian. And I hadn't mentioned that, so thank you, Shandy, for putting that down. So yeah. I see that Nathan Christian has a question. I don't know if you want us to answer that one too, Inga.
I just wanted to come up with the question that, yeah, right. From about yeah, Nathan, who's from Indonesia, right? So I don't know who wants to answer the question about how he or she. Nathan, are you he or she?
I am a he. Thank you for
Okay,
asking.
I'm sorry. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, about how he could be better involved or could get involved in Antarctic research.
José, do you want to tackle that, given all
Okay,
your...
I could start. So if Nathan, well, Portugal is the same. If we go 30 years ago, we were the first ones kind of, trying how to engage. And usually it's bottom up. So according to your research area, you could go and contact the various institutes around the world that works on your research area of interest. So contacting research teams would be my first step. The second step that I would get involved, you already mentioned in your question, is to join Apex, because Apex has newsletters that will provide you a wide range of opportunities and networking, including mentors that can help you. And finally, if you're starting, also get familiar with these with the research programs within SCAR, these expert groups. I'm not sure how much involved are you just thinking of getting engaged, but if you're already engaged, looking at SCAR research programs and expert groups and joining them, the ones that are more related to you, of course. But if you're really just starting, I would join Apex, and I would look for those opportunities regarding with your fields and the teams that are related to your research area that you're interested in. So if you're from Indonesia, I would see who are the Antarctic Treaty parties that are nearby to you, that you could see, oh, could have a collaboration with Japan or Australia or India, for example, that are nearby. That would be my suggestions.
That's great. And I'll just chime in too. I actually, I've had some of my students actually feel like it's hard to know what SCAR group to join, or like there's so many groups and how do you, so your question really resonates with me. How do you even get started? But if you do go to the SCAR website and you look at our science page, you'll see there's, yeah, so many SCAR groups. And I think if you figure out the one that aligns best with your research, they're in different groups have different ways of joining. Some have like a form you fill out, some you contact the leadership. And I think, I don't know if that's something that the SCAR Secretariat even helps people if they really don't know how to join a group and they want to. I don't know if that's, yeah, so Shandy's nodding. So you could reach out to the SCAR email directly and figure that out. So in terms of like volunteering, so you guys put up the portal at scar.org email. Is that the best email to reach out if people do want to volunteer for translating, or if they want to figure out SCAR groups to join?
It's the best one for translations or contacting the portal. For anything else, usually info@scar.org is the best email address, but I will put all of this in the chat right now so that it's
Fabulous. Fabulous. Because yeah, I do think we're such a big like group. Sorry, my puppy's going crazy behind me. We're such a big group, and so I definitely recommend like reaching out if you need help figuring out what groups you want to join and how to reach out to them. And then, as Jose said too, Apex is amazing. And there are a lot of different Antarctic research going on. And so just trying to figure out who's doing that research, reaching out to scientists. I think that can feel daunting too, but I know a lot of people end up finding ways to go south by just approaching different science groups that are going and offering to be a technician on board, volunteering your time, and things like that. So don't be daunted. Antarctica is amazing. It's such a privilege to go there, and I'm sure you can find a way down.
There's one more little question in there. So has that been dealt with? Sorry to chip in about if you can join as a master's student.
That's for joining the SCAR groups, or
It's not clear. Maybe the person who's asked the question could clarify. But I think generally, yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, different groups have different criteria. There usually there is capacity to join as an ECR, and that would be, yeah, you'd be an ECR whether you were a master's or a PhD student, I guess.
Yeah, I think just welcoming wide engagement. I mean, even I know there's some undergraduate honor students that are part of these communities, and right. I mean, there's no, from my understanding, Sandy, there's no,
Well, the different groups have different criteria on membership, so it may be that you wouldn't qualify to be part of a steering committee or part of the formal membership of the group, but there will always be a way to engage and to find out what it's up to and to contribute.
Yeah, and I think most of the groups have their own listservs too, and that's just a really great way to stay involved and learn about things. And hopefully you're all already on the SCAR newsletter, which is hopefully how you learned about this, but that's also a great way to learn about opportunities. So yeah, great. If there's additional questions from folks, feel free to unmute or put them in the chat for any of us. Yeah, Shandy, of course.
I have a question for the participants, actually, which is it would be really useful to know what will help you to engage, what holds you back, if anything does, if it hasn't been covered. So do you get the support of your institutes to engage in policy work? Is there anything more that SCAR could be doing to ensure that your institutes will regard this in a better light? Because that would be really helpful. What can we do to make portal papers something that your employers want you to write? We might not have time to cover that here, but it'd be really good to hear your ideas.
I mean, just to say, Shandy, I think I appreciate your question because SCAR, of course, is really run by volunteers, right? All the science groups, even a lot of us here, it's always a labor of love that we're spending time doing this. So I think that's a really great point, and important for that. Yeah, that our employers and our institutes support what we do. I know I spend time, literally tying my work with SCAR to explaining to my university how it aligns with their broader mission about, leading in the world on research and impact. And so I think we can all find ways to tie it to our institutions and to the work that they're interested in. And SCAR is globally known for its scientific collaboration. So I think just not being afraid to share with your institute how that ties to their broader objectives. The portal papers are great because they are like they're peer reviewed. They have a DOI. So I know, like, when I write a portal paper, I put that on my CV as like another publication I've done. So that's really great, Ryan, actually, that it has that that weight to it.
Thanks, Cassandra. So Nathan just wrote something else in the chat. He's asking if the question for the participants could be written in the chat because he'd love to answer. And
I'm just doing that now. The
oh,
question
okay,
I just
perfect. Thanks,
asked.
Jandy.
Just complementing what Cassandra mentioned about how SCAR could minimize the burden that we have. In this case, I've been engaged with SCAR, but not in SCAR's cats. I think from my perspective, Shandy, is reinforce what SCAR is doing. For example, just having, as a community, having research programs available to any scientist interested and being able to join and actively contribute, just having that network is such a big advantage if you compare with other parts of the world. So that would be my first comment. Second comment is the relevance of the SCAR CBET in supporting and engaging and the early career scientists and educators. But for example, there's the fellowships that SCAR has for early career scientists are essential on boosting some of these early careers foreign opportunities. And even more, SCAR was the SCAR fellowships obliges for the early career scientists to go to another country. And this is a great opportunity for these early career scientists to expand their capacity building. So that's already in place. So if in an ideal world, what I would do is, can you improve and increase their budget? Or with Cassandra is, could you tell the department heads to say, can we go half of the lecturing that we need to do to carry on SCAR work or ATCM work? Unfortunately, they are not very they're not agreeable with this. And one thing is for sure is when we're working with SCAR and the Antarctic Treaty meetings, it does complement much of the science that we do. But the main point is that we love it. It's part of our lives, it's within our genes, and having and opening opportunities to the early career scientists and other colleagues around the world, like Nathan, if we can, is something really worldwide worthwhile. So what I would find is yes, we get tired after so many meetings, but we get such a boost of energy that we last for another few months of energy, and let's do it. But yeah, I don't think there's nothing we can do at national level. The universities, all our colleagues would say we are in another committee, we are another really relevant forum, so we need to decrease their lecturing, so that is not possible. So what I would say is for SCAR, if we have that vision on providing the networking for scientists to do the best science, and that science can be helping Cassandra to do her work related with the treaty, which is one of the key roles of SCAR, I think that's extraordinary and should be nurtured. And the same thing regarding the early career scientists, and keep pushing the fellowships, and also recognizing our peers, particularly the well-established, that played such a key role in SCAR with the medals. I think all of that, I think it's very well done, and it really feels that we have a really good, strong community. But engagement on policies is an ongoing work, like Cassandra mentioned. There's still so much work to do.
May I answer the question directly by unmuting, or will you prefer chat? Will it be okay if I answer directly? Okay. So thank you very much for the question. And I would like to say, to reinforce SCAR, I believe SCAR by itself already have a very good brand. For example, when I even recommend SCAR to my friends for their participations, all of them quickly pick their interest. And that is such an amazing branding, I'll say. However, I do have to say that SCAR influence only mainly approach the countries that already have a PAX committee there, or the countries are included in Antarctic Treaty. However, for example, in my country, Indonesia, we are not a part of Antarctic Treaty yet. And of course, SCAR influence also doesn't come here frequently. I believe the easiest method without adding any budget is simply sending an email, because I believe Indonesia universities and institutes are very much open for collaboration opportunity. We have a lot of undergraduate students or even high school students that would love to take any opportunities available with SCAR. So by sending an email, it is already such a good approach, and I believe it will be very effective, knowing how some countries are actually very desperate to have any collaboration opportunities since it benefits both of them, but it rarely happens because, of course, the countries have something else to manage, and then the organizations have something else to manage, and that causes the discrepancies. So that would be my answer. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Just a keep comment. I just went for a Google search very quickly, and Indonesia have very strong links with Japan and Australia. And those two countries actually have a very well-established Antarctic program. So when we're talking about networking and so on, this could be a good starting point to see which teams in Australia and Japan are already doing Antarctic research in your research area, and could be a good starting point. The other thing, that I think I would mention, but Shandy and Cassandra could check, you could go to a SCAR conference. It's open to anyone. Even when I was Portuguese, I went to SCAR conferences. It doesn't matter your nationality. You can be from Indonesia or from any other country around the world. It's an open science conference. It just brings the committee members, but it's open to everyone. But Shandy can check. So you're very welcome to be part of it, I would think.
No, this is correct. And yes, we probably do need to do more to reach out to countries that are not members. So thank you for reminding us of that.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing this up. And I think also that there will be some travel support from SCAR and other organizations for early career scientists to go there, because obviously it's going to be, well, it's a conference in Norway, so it's going to be expensive, but there will be travel support from SCAR. And maybe the best thing would just if you subscribe to the mailing list of SCAR, and then you will get all the information in time, I think. Yeah, so is there anything else? If not, it's 4 minutes until the end. And I think I would like to wrap up then here and use this opportunity to announce the next webinar, which will very likely be in January, probably at the 13th, but we have to confirm this. And this time we will inform you about the Polar Early Carrier World Summit and about all this amazing work that PSECO and APEX is doing. And I think this is also then something for lots of the audience here who wants to get more involved. And yeah, I mean, you will all stay informed, of course, by us and by the website. And I would like to thank you all again for joining us today, and of course for Cassandra and José and for Ryan to taking the time and to sharing their experience here today. And yeah, then I wish you all, I don't know, a good night, a good day, wherever you are. And hopefully see you next time then in January.
Thank
you so
you.
much, everyone.
Thank you, Inga.
Alrighty.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Shandy. Thank you,
Bye.
Cassandra, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.